They say hatred is loud, burning torches, clenched fists, shouted threats, but real danger is often quieter than a held breath. It's the kind that studies you from the corner of the room, whispering your name only when you're out of earshot, smiling just wide enough to hide the knife. You won't see them storm the gates. You'll feel them rearrange the bricks beneath your foundation. Because the sole intent on your destruction doesn't break the door down, it patiently loosens the hinges until the whole frame collapses under its own weight. Most of us are trained to notice insults, arguments, the obvious friction of open enemies. But what if the deadliest threat is the one that calls you friend? What if the person shaking your hand is measuring how hard they'll squeeze your throat when the lights go out? That is the hatred we're unraveling today. The hatred that would rather see you buried than merely bruised. And if you don't learn to read its signs, you'll keep pouring trust into mouths that only thirst for your downfall. The Stoics warned us, life's true battleground is within. Yet they never denied that external foes exist. People driven by envy, insecurity, or malice so deep, they'd sacrifice their own peace just to shatter yours. The question isn't whether these enemies are out there. The question is whether you can spot them early enough to stay unscarred. Because once you see the pattern, once you recognize the faint heartbeat of destructive intent, you stop giving away the weapons they plan to use. In this episode, we won't settle for the soft language of "they dislike you." We're going straight to the razor's edge. 11 signs a person doesn't just hate you, they want you gone. It's darker territory than we usually walk, but necessary if we're serious about protecting our sanity, our mission, and the quiet dignity that Stoicism demands. Yet remember, this isn't a call to paranoia. It's a call to clarity. Epidemic calm in the presence of unseen daggers. Discernment sharp enough to slice through deception without drawing blood from your own integrity. So take a deep breath. Let your pulse settle into that stoic stillness where emotion bows to insight. Keep your sword sheathed. You may not need it. Often, the greatest defense is simply to step out of striking distance before the blow lands. By the end of this journey, you'll know exactly when to take that step. 1. They sabotage you in silence. You won't hear the sound of their attack. That's what makes it so dangerous. They won't scream in your face, won't call you names, won't confront you directly in a way that would make it obvious. No, what they do is much colder, much quieter, and infinitely more calculated. These are the people who smile when you speak, but write your downfall in invisible ink. They sit at the same table as you, but take notes, not to learn, but to use. They sabotage you not with open force, but with slow erosion. Small rumors, subtle suggestions, silent alliances formed behind closed doors. And the most chilling part? They act like they're on your side the entire time. To many, they look harmless. Some even admire them. But you've felt the shift. You've noticed how your words end up misquoted. How opportunities mysteriously vanish, how someone you trusted seems to always know when and where to place a seed of doubt. Never loud, never direct, just enough to cast a shadow. They might compliment you in a room full of people, but frame it in a way that plants discomfort. "You've changed," they might say with a smile. Or, "I don't know how you juggle all of that," followed by a look that doesn't quite match the tone. What they're doing isn't support, it's strategy. A Stoic understands that not all attacks are physical, and not all wars are fought with weapons. Sometimes war comes disguised in politeness. Marcus Aurelius warned us, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That isn't just a quote, it's a compass. When you're dealing with silent sabotage, the answer is not to scream, fight, or try to prove yourself. That's what they want. They want your reaction to become the evidence they use against you. The louder you defend, the more unstable you seem. The more emotional you become, the more justified their whispers sound. The Stoic doesn't play that game. He steps back, he observes, he notices the patterns, the inconsistencies, the sudden misfortunes that always seem to circle back to one smiling face. And then he detaches. quietly, with strength, without drama, because the most powerful move against silent sabotage is silence of your own, the kind that doesn't explain, doesn't justify, doesn't invite further damage. You simply reduce access. You speak less. You guard your energy like gold. You stop giving your plans, your pain, your process to someone who's already shown they'll use it as ammunition. And here's something important to remember. Just because someone isn't aggressive doesn't mean they're not dangerous. Often, the enemy who harms you without ever raising their voice is the one who causes the most damage. But their power relies on one thing: your blindness. The moment you see clearly, the moment you stop hoping for honesty from a dishonest heart, they lose their grip. And you reclaim your peace not by exposing them, but by making yourself untouchable to them. So ask yourself, who smiles too much when things go wrong for me? Who knows things they shouldn't know? Who's always just a little too close to my missteps? Who drains my energy without ever raising their tone? That's how you begin to see the sabotage for what it is. Not misfortune, not coincidence, but deliberate harm dressed in charm. And once you see it, you don't owe them revenge. You owe yourself distance. 2. They imitate you, then undermine you. At first it feels like flattery. They echo your phrases, adopt your habits, borrow your style. You see traces of yourself in them, your way of speaking, your opinions, even your ambitions reflected back like a mirror. But it's not admiration, it's surveillance, a mask. And once they've gathered enough, once they've studied your rhythm, your strengths, your social currency, they begin the quiet dismantling. What was once imitation becomes sabotage, dressed in your own skin. This is not the work of a fan. It's the strategy of someone who doesn't just dislike you, they want to replace you. They copy your essence so convincingly that others don't see it happening. They appear inspired, supportive, loyal. But what they're really doing is learning your blueprint so they can discredit you from the inside. And when the moment comes, they strike. Not with overt insults, but with subtle shifts, rewriting stories in your absence, casting doubt on your credibility, bending perceptions behind your back. Their game is not domination through force, it's destruction through confusion. They want to blur the line between who you are and who they pretend to be, so when others begin to question your actions or integrity, the seed of doubt has already been planted. And if you respond with anger or accusation, they'll raise their hands and say, "But I'm just being like you." It's weaponized reflection, and it's dangerous. A wise man doesn't compete with copies, he simply keeps evolving. He knows that authenticity can't be duplicated because it's rooted in soul, not in mimicry. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. So instead of shrinking or defending, he transcends. He keeps creating, keeps growing, keeps refining until the imitator can no longer keep up with the original. But here's the deeper truth. They don't really want to be you. They want your attention, your reaction, your collapse. Because when you lose control, they gain power. When you lower yourself to expose them, you look insecure. That's how they win. Not by being better, but by making you look worse. So don't give them that stage. The Stoic response is silence sharpened by awareness. You don't have to call them out. You don't have to prove they're copying you. Those who see clearly will notice, and those who don't were never truly in your corner to begin with. Your job is to stay focused on the work, the path, the principles that brought you this far. Imitation might steal your appearance, but never your essence. So if you feel someone is mirroring you too closely, not with love, but with strategy, don't panic. Don't chase. Simply evolve. Because no copy can survive long in the presence of the ever-transforming original. 3. They trigger conflict and watch you burn. They don't attack you in the open. That would be too honest, too traceable. Instead, they whisper, not once, not loudly, but often, and quietly enough to pass as harmless. They drop one misleading comment here. Ask a twisted question there. Share a version of your truth that's just crooked enough to turn others sideways. Then, when tension rises in your life, when conversations become sharp and trust starts to decay, they act surprised. They play the innocent bystander, and they say things like, "Oh, I thought you already knew that," or "I was just trying to help." No, they weren't. They were lighting a match and watching through the window. The person who truly hates you rarely wants a fight. They want fallout. Not confrontation, but contamination. They want you to destroy yourself socially, emotionally, reputationally. They plant little emotional mines around you and wait for you to step on one. And if you do, if you raise your voice, react too strongly, or call them out in a moment of raw emotion, suddenly you're the one who looks unbalanced. You're the dramatic one. You're the aggressor. The conflict explodes, and they walk away clean. A hidden enemy doesn't aim to defeat you with strength. They aim to undo you with subtlety. Their success lies in making you look like your own worst enemy. And this is where the Stoic philosophy becomes not just useful, but vital. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." A Stoic doesn't give his enemies the pleasure of his collapse. He steps back, observes, breathes, and most importantly, refuses the invitation to chaos. But make no mistake, this isn't about being passive, it's about being precise. When you notice the same pattern repeating, the same people always nearby when confusion begins, the same coincidences that surround every argument, the same tension that rises without reason, you must stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "Who benefits if I break down?" You see, people who want to see you burn rarely show up with a torch. They show up with advice, with concern, with a friendly tone and an enemy's intent. And their most dangerous weapon isn't anger, it's influence. They aim to control how others see you while you're too busy defending yourself to notice the walls closing in. The Stoic's defense is clarity. He doesn't chase rumors. He doesn't try to correct every lie or defend every attack. He lets his actions, his consistency, and his calm speak. Because truth has a frequency that the dishonest cannot maintain. Eventually, the manipulator will be exposed, not by your shouting, but by their own inconsistency. So when someone tries to spark conflict in your life and you feel the urge to respond, pause. That feeling, that heat rising in your chest, that's the test, the moment they've been waiting for, but it can also be the moment you reclaim your power. Let them talk, let them speculate, let them spin their webs. Your peace, your dignity, and your refusal to perform, that's your weapon, because while they feed off drama, you are fueled by discipline, and the more you stand still in their storm, the more obvious it becomes who brought the chaos. The Stoic doesn't fear fire, he simply refuses to be consumed by it. 4. They manipulate others to turn against you. When a person's hatred crosses into something more dangerous, something darker than mere resentment, you'll see it in how they operate in silence. They won't just argue with you. They won't shout or confront you like someone honest with their dislike. Instead, they play a quieter game, a more calculated one. They begin to poison the minds of others, not with outright lies, but with suggestions, hints, the kind of comments that raise questions rather than provide answers. "I don't know. Something about him just feels off. She's not who you think she is." They speak like they're protecting someone, but what they're really doing is planting seeds. Seeds that bloom into suspicion, into doubt, into disconnection. This is not confrontation. It's manipulation. And it's deadly in its subtlety. You start to feel it before you even know what's happening. People around you begin to treat you differently, and you don't know why. A coldness enters the room before you do. Eyes shift when you speak. Friends become less responsive, less open. You're left wondering, what changed? You replay your steps, review your words, trying to find the moment something went wrong. But the truth is, It didn't go wrong. It was made to look wrong. And the person pulling the strings did it so skillfully that even you start questioning yourself. This tactic is especially dangerous because it doesn't just hurt you, it isolates you. The hidden enemy knows that isolation makes a person vulnerable. When you're cut off from support, from connection, from affirmation, it's easier to destabilize you. That's why they work in shadows. That's why they aim not just at your reputation, but at your relationships. Because tearing you down isn't enough for them. They want you to feel alone while it's happening. But the Stoics offer a different kind of armor. Epictetus warned, "If evil be said of thee, and it be true, correct thyself. If it be a lie, laugh at it." A wise man does not run from slander, nor does he exhaust himself trying to control the story others tell. He knows that narrative is external. What matters is character, who you are in private, what you stand for when no one claps. Reputation is borrowed, but virtue is yours alone. So, what do you do when someone is turning others against you? You don't explain yourself to every person who starts to doubt. You don't beg for clarity or plead your case. You live, fully, honestly, consistently. The storm will pass, the fog will lift, and when it does, those who walked away will see who stood in silence with strength while others moved in manipulation. And if they don't, that's fine too, because peace comes not from being understood by everyone, but by being deeply at peace with yourself. You must learn to walk alone without bitterness, to watch the collapse of false alliances without panic, and to remain gentle in a world trying to twist you into something you're not. Let them manipulate, let them whisper, let them gather people in dark corners, but don't stoop to their level. Don't fight shadows with shadows. Your life, your actions, your unwavering alignment with truth, that's your answer. Not to them, but to yourself. 5. They rejoice when you suffer. There's a difference between someone disliking you and someone being truly disturbed by your existence. One will avoid you. The other will wait for you to fall. And when you do, they smile. Not outwardly, of course. They won't throw a party when your business fails or your relationship ends. But if you look close enough, you'll notice it. In their silence, in their stillness, in the way they stop competing when you're down, in the way their voice becomes sweeter when you're in pain. There's a strange calm that washes over them, as if your suffering balances something inside them. And that, right there, is the clearest sign. They didn't just want distance, they wanted destruction. Real hatred is not loud, it's quiet, it waits, it doesn't throw punches, it studies the bruises. And when life finally hits you, when you face loss, shame, or grief, they don't lift a finger to help. In fact, they'll often cloak their pleasure in pity, a backhanded compliment, a slow, rehearsed, "I'm so sorry to hear that," but there's no sorrow in their tone, only satisfaction, because deep down, your struggle makes them feel lighter, safer, superior. Your downfall is their relief. But the question is, why? Why would someone rejoice in your pain? The Stoics would say it's not really about you. It's about what you represent. Perhaps your presence reminds them of what they could have been. Perhaps your calm unnerves their chaos. Perhaps your ambition challenges their comfort. When someone cannot destroy what you have, they begin to resent what you are. And when life weakens you, they take it as a signal. Now it's safe to feel strong again. This is why Epictetus warned, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Because when your enemy is celebrating your collapse, your reaction is what separates you from becoming like them. You don't have to announce your pain to the world. You don't have to prove you're okay. But you do need to remember that suffering is a test of dignity. If someone rejoices in your sorrow, don't let them steal the meaning from your suffering. Turn inward, observe, endure, learn. A wise man knows that pain is not the end of the story. Sometimes it's the cleansing fire, and the more it burns, the more it reveals. Let those who hate you watch. Let them feel relief when you're on your knees. But do not let their reaction define your next move. That power belongs to you. Because the true response to cruelty is not revenge, it's resurrection. Quietly, without theatrics. You rise, not to spite them, but because your soul refuses to stay down. You rise, not to regain status, but to rebuild strength. You rise, not for them, but for yourself. Let them enjoy your suffering if they must. You'll enjoy the silence that comes when you no longer need their approval, their apology, or their applause. That is the Stoic way. 6. They pretend to care while feeding your insecurities. Sometimes the most dangerous people in your life don't attack you. They nurture you, just enough to stay close. They ask how you're doing. They offer advice. They compliment you just enough to keep you wondering. But behind every soft word is a seed of doubt. They don't feed your confidence. They feed your confusion. I'm just looking out for you, they say. I care about you. I just don't want you to get hurt. But what they're really doing is studying your cracks, poking at your insecurities, and wrapping it all in concern, so you never question the source of your self-doubt. This kind of enemy is more insidious than the loud ones, because they wear a mask of friendship, and the moment you begin to feel secure around them, they tilt the mirror slightly, just enough to make you question yourself. They'll say things like, "Are you sure this is what you want?" Or, "That doesn't really sound like you." And while those words might seem harmless, when said at the right moment, after a failure, during a moment of vulnerability, they plant doubt. And doubt in the wrong hands is a weapon far sharper than any sword. The Stoics warned us about this kind of manipulation. They taught that true power lies in controlling your own narrative, not letting others write it for you. Seneca once said, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." And this applies here too. You begin to let these people close because they seem warm, helpful, empathetic. But once you let them into your mind, they use your openness against you. They're not looking to support you, they're gathering ammunition. It's subtle, which is what makes it effective. They remember the things you told them when you were down, and they echo them back to you when you're starting to rise. You tell them you don't feel smart enough, and 3 months later, they casually say, "This seems complicated for someone who's not really into that kind of thing." You say you're worried people don't like you, and they say, "You're not for everyone." And suddenly what felt like support feels like surveillance. You start editing yourself. You shrink. Not because of what they said directly, but because of what they've implied so skillfully, so gently, that you're not sure whether it came from them or from inside you. This is how the enemy works when they don't want to be seen. They keep you small by making you believe it's your own idea. The Stoic path is to develop such awareness that no one can shake your center without your permission. And that's the key. Permission. You don't owe anyone access to your thoughts, your doubts, your inner world. Not everyone who listens deserves your voice. Not everyone who asks deserves your truth. Marcus Aurelius said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." That's the response. When you notice the hidden jab wrapped in kindness, don't fight it. Don't argue. Don't even explain. Just notice. Withdraw your trust slowly. Reclaim your space fully. Because the wise don't need to expose every enemy, they simply stop feeding them. 7. They try to make you look like the villain. There's a certain kind of person who never strikes directly. They don't shout. They don't insult. They don't fight in public. They twist. They imply. They plant. And slowly, without you realizing it, they start rewriting the story, casting themselves as the misunderstood hero and you as the unstable, angry, or selfish villain. It's not just manipulation, it's character assassination by narrative. And the most dangerous part, they make you help them do it. They'll start by sharing small half-truths with others. A moment when you were frustrated becomes a story about how you're always aggressive. A boundary you set becomes, they're just difficult to deal with. And because they say it calmly, with a tone of concern, people believe them. They look like they're just worried about you, while in reality, they're tearing your credibility apart behind your back. One conversation at a time. The Stoics warned us about reputation and why it should never become your master. Epictetus taught that our peace must come from who we are, not how we are seen. Because when your peace depends on public opinion, you'll constantly find yourself trapped, defending a version of yourself that others are determined to distort. You'll waste energy trying to correct the record, explain yourself, or prove your goodness to people who already made up their minds. And in doing so, you give your enemy exactly what they want: control over your center. When someone is committed to misunderstanding you, clarity becomes futile. They're not listening, they're gathering, not to understand, but to build a case. The Stoic response isn't to fight every falsehood. It's to live in such a way that the lies eventually dissolve under the weight of your consistency. Marcus Aurelius said, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth. But if someone is just attacking or misrepresenting, I am not obliged to respond." In situations like this, silence isn't weakness, it's strength in its most distilled form. You don't need to chase after every whisper or put out every fire they set in secret. You need only to remain rooted in who you are. Let your calm, your integrity, your steady hand become your defense. Not for them, but for you. Because once you see what they're doing, the goal isn't to win the public battle, it's to protect your private peace. What they want is your reaction, your anger, your over-explaining. That's the fuel they burn to light their story. And every time you respond with outrage, you confirm their version of events. But when you respond with presence, when you keep showing up calm, clear, and consistent, you take the story away from them without ever having to say a word. The Stoic doesn't play games with shadows. He stays in the light, even when the crowd is confused. Because over time, the truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to last. 8. They drain your energy. There's a subtle kind of violence that doesn't involve insults or fists. It comes in the form of exhaustion. And the worst kind of enemy isn't always the one who attacks you directly. Sometimes it's the one who stands close, pretending to be harmless, while slowly draining you of your emotional energy, your mental clarity, and your will to move forward. It's the fatigue that follows every interaction, the fog in your mind after every conversation, the sense that something important was just taken from you, even if you can't quite name what it was. These people don't operate with knives. They operate with invisible threads. They pull your attention with passive-aggressive comments. They bait you with subtle guilt. They constantly create emotional situations that require you to explain, defend, or clarify yourself. And the more time you spend in their presence, the more you realize that you're not yourself anymore. You feel reactive instead of calm, confused instead of clear, tired instead of centered. And that's no accident. That's their strategy. The Stoics taught that your peace is your power, and losing it is a sign that someone else has gotten too close to your mind. Epictetus said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." But what about those who don't just anger you? What about those who leave you in a state of constant fatigue and unease? These people don't want to defeat you with confrontation. They want to disable you through depletion. You'll know you're dealing with someone like this when you start rearranging your life around them, not because they asked, but because it's the only way to preserve your sanity. You delay projects, you withdraw from others, you walk on eggshells, you spend your quiet time recovering from their presence rather than reflecting on your own growth. And eventually, you begin to lose your rhythm. That's when you need to wake up, because a person who truly supports your peace doesn't make your soul feel like it's in a war zone. They don't confuse you. They don't make you doubt yourself. They don't need you constantly performing emotional gymnastics just to keep things from falling apart. The Stoic sees this clearly and responds not with confrontation, but with distance. Detachment, in this case, is not cruelty. It's survival. It is the conscious decision to guard your energy like it's gold, because it is. You only get so much clarity, so much focus, so much calm each day. And if someone consistently empties you, they are not a neutral presence. They are a threat. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do. The more you allow chaos to live rent-free in your mind, the less room you have for your own becoming. So step back, observe, ask yourself, do I feel more alive or more depleted after this interaction?" That question alone can reveal everything. You don't need drama. You don't need an argument. You just need to stop handing your energy to people who feed on it. Your emotional space is sacred, and you must defend it with the quiet strength of someone who has finally decided to stop bleeding for people who never intend to heal. 9. They test your limits, not to understand, but to break you. Some people don't want to know you so they can connect. They want to know you so they can dismantle you, and they'll never say it directly. Instead, they push in subtle ways, asking questions that seem innocent, probing past wounds, pushing emotional buttons just to see what happens. It's not curiosity, it's weaponization. It's not connection, it's psychological mapping. Every reaction you give them is ammunition. Every boundary you hesitate to reinforce becomes an opening, and slowly, methodically, they start to play a game you didn't agree to join. This is not a debate. This is not a misunderstanding. This is someone trying to figure out how much you'll tolerate before you crack. And when they see that you avoid conflict, they push harder. When they sense that you want peace, they manufacture chaos. When they learn what triggers you, they touch it. Gently at first, then more boldly. It's never about the surface topic. It's never about the conversation. It's about control. It's about seeing how far you'll bend before you break. The Stoic response is not to yell or argue. It is to see with clarity, to realize that just because someone speaks softly doesn't mean their intentions are gentle. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." That means not becoming reactive, not becoming cruel, and most importantly, not becoming naive. Because true strength doesn't just resist force, it recognizes manipulation and refuses to play along. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to set a boundary without explanation. A wise person doesn't keep opening the door to someone who only comes in to rearrange the furniture of their peace. You don't need to justify your limits. You don't owe anyone access to your mind, your emotions, or your private space, especially those who test it, not to understand you, but to erode you. And here's the truth. Most of the damage done to us in life doesn't come from enemies with knives. It comes from people who kept nudging, poking, and pushing until we started shrinking, until we lost trust in our own instincts, until we forgot what it felt like to be steady. But the moment you see the pattern, the moment you realize this is not love, not curiosity, not support, it is domination dressed in friendliness, that's when you reclaim your power. Seneca said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." And in a world where so many want to shape you into a version they can control, the courageous act is this: to know yourself so well that no one can rewrite you. To draw your lines boldly, to say, this is where you stop. Because when you don't teach people how to treat you, they will test until you forget who you are. But when you live with conscious boundaries, no one gets to turn your soul into a battleground. 10. They never celebrate your wins. There's a special kind of silence that reveals more than words ever could. It's not the silence of someone who didn't see your progress. It's the silence of someone who saw it and couldn't stand it. You get a promotion, a breakthrough, a moment of recognition, and they say nothing. Not a nod, not a message, not even fake applause, because your rise unsettles them. Your success reminds them of their stagnation, and rather than confront their own limitations, they resent your growth in silence. These are the people who are loud when you fail and invisible when you rise. When something goes wrong, they're quick to chime in, to express concern, to offer unsolicited advice, to check in under the guise of support. But when you shine, they vanish. They scroll past your win. They change the subject. They act like it didn't happen, because in their mind, your progress is an offense. It's a threat to the identity they've built around you, staying small, quiet, or broken. The wise man watches this pattern not with bitterness, but with awareness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And in this context, their silence is not a blockage. It's a signpost, a reminder that your path is not dependent on validation, that your growth is not up for discussion, that the applause of others, while pleasant, is not your fuel. Because when you understand that, you free yourself from one of the most subtle prisons of all, the need to be celebrated by those who secretly wish for your decline. You don't need their recognition. You don't need them to see you. You need to keep walking. You need to keep rising. The Stoic lives for inner excellence, not external praise. You measure your progress by how you respond to envy, not by how many people cheer you on. And often, the louder your silence becomes, the more grounded, disciplined, and focused you remain, the more it disturbs those who relied on your past weakness to feel comfortable. There's a hidden power in being unaffected, in seeing someone refuse to acknowledge your growth and smiling anyway, not to prove anything, but because their silence taught you everything. It showed you who's in your corner and who was only there for your collapse. It reminded you that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your transformation. And most importantly, it taught you the ancient Stoic principle, to become so grounded in your purpose that you no longer flinch at absence, rejection, or quiet envy. Because here's the truth. The people who love you, really love you, won't go silent when you win. They'll celebrate even the small steps. They'll clap even if it reminds them of their own unfinished business. That's how you know the difference. And once you see it, don't unsee it. Let it shape how you move forward. Let it remind you to invest your energy in those who nourish your soul, not those who compete with your light in secret. 11. They obsess over you, not because they admire you, but because they envy your light. At first it may seem like attention, curiosity, even interest, but when you look deeper, you begin to notice something unsettling. Their eyes are always on you, even when you're not looking. They mimic your style, echo your words, monitor your movements. But this is no innocent admiration. It's not respect, it's fixation. The kind that grows not from love, but from something far more toxic, envy. A wise man knows the difference between being appreciated and being watched. There's a certain kind of person who can't stand your inner freedom because they've never tasted it. Your light, your confidence, your ability to move forward in life despite the odds. It disturbs them. Not because they want it for themselves, but because they can't bear to see you live with it. So they watch, not to learn, not to grow, but to find cracks, weak spots, openings. They don't want to build what you've built. They want to see it crumble. Carl Jung once wrote, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. The more you grow, the more clearly your presence will cast a shadow into the insecurities of others. But this isn't your burden to carry." Stoic philosophy reminds us again and again, we are responsible only for our own character, not the reactions it triggers in others. Epictetus taught that what disturbs people is not events, but their judgments about events. In this case, it's not your success that hurts them. It's the story they tell themselves about why you have it, and they don't. You may find yourself shrinking, unconsciously, dimming your spark, speaking less, moving more carefully, hiding joy to avoid triggering someone's hidden resentment. But that's not Stoic. That's not strength. The Stoic path demands we walk in our truth, regardless of who it unsettles, because that discomfort, it's not yours. It belongs to the one who refuses to grow. You were not born to be small just because someone else is afraid of their own potential. The person who obsesses over you in silence, who watches from the corners of rooms and screens, who smiles while secretly resenting your breath, they are not your enemy because they hate you. They are your enemy because they hate what you represent. Freedom, wholeness, peace, things they haven't made peace with inside themselves. That's why the Stoic remains untouchable, not by fighting back, but by refusing to let that darkness influence his decisions, his self-worth, or his mission. You do not need to explain your peace to those who live in chaos. You do not need to protect their feelings by dimming your clarity. Your only duty is to remain fully yourself, not in rebellion, but in alignment. Let them obsess. Let them misunderstand. Let them talk. Because the moment you start living to avoid their discomfort, you've handed them power. And the wise man never does that. So if you feel watched, imitated, or targeted by silent envy, don't react. Rise. Stand tall in your light. Walk your path with grace. Protect your peace fiercely. As Seneca said, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Don't waste yours explaining your light to those committed to darkness. Just keep shining and let your life speak louder than their hate ever could. Some people will resent your peace more than they ever celebrated your pain. That's the truth. You could live quietly, kindly, even humbly, and they would still find a reason to despise you, not because you've wronged them, but because your very existence reminds them of everything they've refused to become. That's why the wise don't live for validation, and they don't waste time trying to correct false perceptions. They live in alignment, not approval. If there's one thing Stoic philosophy has taught us across centuries, it's this. Your energy is your responsibility. You don't owe access to your presence, your dreams, or your soul to those who intend to harm it. You don't need to argue, explain, prove, or retaliate. You don't need to fight to be seen or beg to be understood. Your path is not theirs to comprehend. It's yours to walk with dignity. So let them talk, let them assume, let them twist your silence into whatever story suits their ego. You are not here to win a popularity contest. You are here to win your freedom from noise, from distraction, from the poison of needing to be liked. And in doing that, you become untouchable. Not because the world stops attacking you, but because it no longer moves you off-center. Live in a way that honors truth, not drama. Build a life that thrives in silence, not applause. Choose peace, not performance. You'll lose a few people when you choose that path, but the ones you lose were never with you. And the ones who stay, they'll see your stillness as strength, because that's what it is. If this episode stirred something in you, a realization, a quiet shift, a call to protect your power, then I invite you to keep walking this path with me. Share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe, reflect, and return tomorrow for more clarity, strength, and stoic insight. You don't need to be louder, just wiser. And if you are, they'll feel it, even in silence.